there are dozens and dozens of different reading traditions that are documented in these manuscripts where no two are exactly alike.
The lower text shows some significant variations.
No original Uthmanic Quran or called recension, one of the Uthmanic recensions ever reached us.
1972, a mosque was being repaired in Sana'a in Yemen, and it was found that in the ceiling of the mosque, there were many old documents stashed. And among the documents, some were Quranic copies, and there was one of particular interest that came to be widely referred to now as the Sana'a palimpsest. This particular palimpsest had a copy of the Quran written, apparently a copy of the Quran, that was erased, and then a new copy of the Quran was written over it. Now, the new copy, which is referred to as the upper level or the upper layer of this text, that corresponds closely to what we're reading today as an Uthmanic copy, a copy of the Uthmanic codices. The lower text shows some significant variations, not so significant as to challenge any of the things that Muslims practice or even what we believe. So no severe effect or major effect on the Muslim practices, and no effect on Muslim belief.
That is very interesting. Make sure you know the word palimpsest. That is where people write on something, parchment or something like that. They write on it and then erase it later to reuse it, write something else over it, and then now we find we can actually detect that earlier layer and then read the earlier layer. That's a palimpsest, writing on top of other writing. The version of the Quran there, it's a different ordering of chapters. Sometimes you occasionally have like a verse missing or you have something added, have tons of textual variants. What does Shabir say? He says, but it's not something that affects Islamic belief or practice. What is Shabir's defense of textual variants and a different ordering of the chapters? And so what's his defense? His defense is, but it doesn't affect Islamic belief or practice. I agree. It doesn't affect in the Bible either. So why do you attack the Bible based on textual variants that don't affect Christian doctrine or practice, but it's perfectly acceptable in Islam? Stop the hypocrisy, and we're good. We're good after that. One of the interesting things I remember is, remember Ali Dawah tried to trick you on the...
Don't you know that every single verse of the Quran begins with Bismillah? Every chapter of the Quran starts with Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim.
No, it doesn't.
Yes, except... Which chapter?
Except chapter 9, which is Tawbah.
Surah Tawbah. Yeah. Good. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about his mercy.
Knowledge here? What is this?
Every chapter of the Quran begins with this Bismillah, right? Except Surah 9. What's interesting is in the Sana'a palimpsest, it actually has the Bismillah at the beginning of Surah 9. What's interesting is the very next verse is, do not say in the name of Allah here. And it's like, wait a minute, what is that? What is that next verse that says, do not say that here? It just said say it, and then it says don't say it. So is that an addition, like someone saying don't say this out loud for some reason? Or is it saying, is that an abrogation of some kind? Or what in the world is that? And then in the Uthmanic version, they actually just take it out completely. And so what you see is there's some sort of process going on in the history of the Quran when your average Muslim believes, nope, delivered to Muhammad and then passed on to us perfectly. And it's like, it's clear there are things going on here. But notice, I mean, you have at least an extra verse right there at the beginning of Surah 9, and then you have a verse missing later in Surah 9 in the same manuscript. So it's like perfect preservation, guys. Seriously. So
many other companions could have had their own codices during this period of time. And so we have codices mentioned, a codex of Ibn Masud, and a codex of Ubay bin Ka'b, and many other companions as well.
According to Ibn Abi Daud's Kitab al-Masahif, Ibn Masud had 111 chapters in his Quran. He did not believe that Surah 1, Surah 113, and Surah 114 are supposed to be in the Quran because these are prayers. His claim was, the Quran is Allah speaking to us. That's Allah's speech. These are our speech to Allah. These should not be in the Quran. Ubay bin Ka'b had 116 chapters. He had those three prayers. He included the three prayers, and he had two additional prayers. He had two additional Muslim prayers that he thought were not just prayers, they're actually part of the Quran. Zayd ibn Thabit seems to have compromised, right? Like, I'll take some of them, but not all of them, right? Like, I'll compromise between you. And he ends up with 114. They couldn't even agree on what went into the Quran. I have no idea how you could look at any of this and say, perfect, miraculous preservation.
Maybe the Sana'a palimpsest was compiled by a companion without the proper rigorous methods that were used by Zayd bin Thabit and the committee that worked.
The reason I brought that up is Sneeko, when he's talking about the Council of Nicaea. Ladies and gentlemen of the world, especially you Muslims who are watching,
I forgot about that.
Anyone who says Council of Nicaea and then starts talking about suppressing books or canon of scripture, anyone who says Council of Nicaea was doctoring the Bible, you've just run into someone who has absolutely no clue what he's talking about.
What's the chapter and verse of that?
Matt, verse 39.
What's the chapter?
I don't know. There's been so many different.
Bible?
There's so many different versions of the Bible, bro.
What other versions of the Bible are there? Steve?
There's so many, bro.
Okay, tell me some.
Okay, let's look up versions of the Bible. We have the King James Version, the English Standard Version, the New American Standard, the New English Bible.
You know the funny thing about all those different versions, Cinco?
What?
They're all just different translations, buddy.
Yeah, guys, that's like me saying there's so many different versions of the Quran. There's the Yusuf Ali version, the Haleli Khan version, the Pickthall version, the M.H. Shakir version, the Arbery version. Like a Muslim would go, those are translations, dude.
Most people haven't read the original version. Have you heard of the Council of Nicaea? There's been a lot of chapters that have been removed, and the Bible's been tampered and manipulated with a lot over the years. Well, they did remove the Council of Nicaea from the original Bible. A lot of people have
the Council of Nicaea
parts of the Bible.
Wow,
Council of Nicaea. What are you saying? There's a book called the Council of Nicaea.
Yeah,
there's not no book called the Council of Nicaea.
It's not a whole book, but
it's not a whole book. If you at least know that it's a council and not a book, you can still make something up. But notice we'll make something up about the idea that the books of the Bible were selected at the Council of Nicaea. We'll make that up. That's just a lie. We'll make that up. But then we'll say, because Christianity has that, you can't trust the Bible. So you can only trust the Quran because we don't have anything like that. When in reality, the Council of Nicaea had nothing to do with selecting books of the Bible. But in Islam, they actually burned everything and imposed by power of the government a Quran on everyone. And we're not supposed to be even slightly suspicious about that. Notice, Sneeko has no idea about any of this. And this is what he's saying is the basis of his confidence in Islam is. This is insane. What else do you need if you're still clinging to this myth of perfect preservation and only one Quran since the time of Muhammad? Like what level of delusion do you have?
The scholarly opinion is quite clear on this, that there have been variations and differences, different codexes, manuscripts, different lengths of the Quran. And this should be known so that your whole idea of perfect preservation word for word, letter for letter, dot for dot is not accurate.
As Shabir pointed out, Muslim scholars have always known this, have always known about these disagreements in these different Qurans and textual variants and the different versions of the Quran that exist today.
All right, let's check this out, guys. Look at what this guy says about the manuscripts. Muslims like to talk about manuscripts. Let's see what they say.
Essentially, if you start looking at the early manuscripts, and this is a very interesting area of research, there are dozens and dozens of different reading traditions that are documented in these manuscripts where no two are exactly alike.
So, guys, no two are exactly alike, and you guys know that quote from Bart Ehrman that they always like to say: copies of copies of copies of copies. Mm-hmm. Well, look at this one. This is a Muslim scholar, and check this out. Both of these guys are Muslims. The one I just played in this guy. Watch this. They're asking the question: what about the Uthmanic copies of the Quran? Do any of those exist today? So are there any copies from Uthman that we have today? Watch what he says.
You know that Uthman ordered the commission to write down few copies, 4 or 5 copies, and he dispatched those copies into various cities of the Islamic Empire.
By the way, he's saying 4 or 5. Some Muslim sources say like 12 or 14. They have no idea how many copies Uthman made. But anyway, watch what he says.
And then copies were made out of those. The Quranic copies, we don't have them, and they did not reach us.
We don't have them, guys. They didn't reach us.
What was the point of all that?
Watch this. Watch this now. Watch this. Oops.
But no original Uthmanic Quran or called recension, one of the Uthmanic recensions ever reached us.
None of them, guys. Nothing from Uthman.
Dang.
Nothing from Uthman reached us today.
And what they believe that those kept now in various places, like Hussein, like Topkapi, they're all copies or copies of copies.
Guys, you know, Muslims love to quote Bart Ehrman, who says that You guys don't have the Bible. You have copies of copies of copies. This guy is your Bart Ehrman, and he's actually a Muslim. Okay, he's actually a Muslim. He's saying like the Topkapi Museum, Husseini, Topkapi Quran manuscript, the Husseini, all these other ones. He's saying these claim to be Uthmanic, but they're really just copies of copies of copies. And watch what he says now. Watch what he says. Check this out.
They were ascribed or attributed falsely to Uthman.
Falsely to Uthman.
Dang.
Recently, you're talking in the past few decades, it became a very popular just lie to say perfect preservation right down to the letter as a miracle of Islam. And then more recently, Hatun shows up to Speaker's Corner with a couple of dozen different Arabic versions of the Quran. These are not different translations. These are different Arabic versions. In other words, you could pick any two of those Qurans, line them up, and you can find differences between any two of those Qurans. Once you've told the population perfect preservation right down to the letter, and then people start going to their scholars, start finding out, wait a minute, what about these two different Qurans? What about this difference in between Hafs and Warsh? What about this? And Yasser Qadhi's, at the end of the day, Yasser Qadhi's response was, there are holes in the narrative.